The Holy Grail of Investing by Tony Robbins and Christopher Zook. I will drop a link in the description of my previous video about a background of this book, but the short of it is this is meant to be a third installment of his, what he called his financial freedom trilogy, following Money, Master the Game and Unshakable, which is a personal favorite of mine. How does this one distinguish itself? In that video, I went over what's expected in Holy Grail. Is it accurate? What is smart money? What is it? Is it some kind of new investing? What are the basics of people who are just starting out? What can they learn from it? Let's talk about it. Just a little overview, by the way, of what you'll see in the description. There are affiliate links, and if you buy anything through those links, like maybe this book, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel and keep making these videos. You can also find this book and many others on my Amazon storefront, but any books I mention in this video, chances are I've reviewed them and I'll drop those in the description too. So affiliate links, Amazon storefront, and other reviews. But welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. A little bit of an elephant in the room, for horrible lack of better verbiage. Tony Robbins is an extremely reputable author in nonfiction and self-development. His previous book was Life Force, which I enjoyed so much that I gave it my number one book of 2022. I still went out of my way, though, to make a whole video about things I didn't like about it. So I'll do that with this book too. So for anyone who's gonna hate on him and the book in this video, you're watching the wrong video. And I'll make sure to drop a link to that one below too once it comes out. It's gonna be one of my next couple videos. Meanwhile, I'll bite my tongue in this review because I know this is gonna be a popular book and there is definitely a lot to be said about it. So without further ado, chapter 1 is The Search for the Holy Grail. In this book, Robbins interviewed a baker's dozen, 13 of the most successful investors who have created extraordinary returns rarely seen by the general public. I looked at this list and I was impressed by what he named each interview. I also liked how different all of it was. He talks about investing in Asian private equity, sports ownership, the future of energy, venture capital, enterprise software, unicorns, and way more, way more. This is alternative investing. That's what it is. Alternative investing is financial assets that are not stocks, bonds, or cash. And yes, this does include real estate, which he dedicated a whole chapter to, because why the hell not? It's real estate, right? I think it makes sense for Robbins to write a book on like this in the trilogy. I haven't heard of literally any of these people and many of these things. The people everyone's heard of are interviewed in the other books, like Warren Buffett and stuff like that. In general, the whole concept, it is a principle that Ray Dalio, total legend, often referred to as the Steve Jobs of investing, came up with, where you focus on investments with a maximum upside and minimum downside. Chapter 2, GP stakes, a piece of the action. A GP is a general partner. A GP stake typically produces cash distributions in the range of 5 to 10% annually, beginning in day one of the investment. There is a lot of talk in this chapter about private equity firms. For those who don't know, a private equity firm involves ownership in private companies. It is a source of capital for partnerships that buy and manage companies before selling them. Ideally, people join these partnerships looking to not just trade up and make money, but actually improve the company before it's sold. Chapter 3 is pro sports ownership, swinging for the fences. Swinging for the fences, folks. That's what we're going to do here. He began this chapter explaining a little about the importance of sports in today's culture and the history of it as a business opportunity. The way he explained investing in pro sports, it sounded very different from just betting on teams. Although sports gambling is a big reason for revenue in teams now that it's legalized in 35 states and being advertised on TV and billboards nowadays like it's some kind of necessity. Talk about like FanDuel and all of that crap. But the bottom line is that in the last 100 years, sports leagues have survived pandemics, lockouts, world wars, player strikes, recessions, and everything in between, and they're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. 50 years from now, there will be a World Series in October, and there will be a Super Bowl in February. And you also learn about what's driving the compounding figures of sports, from everything from streaming wars to low production costs to self-generated team revenue and way more. Chapter 4 is private credit, leaders in lending. This is a way for established businesses to borrow money without using a bank. This can generate 2 to 3 times the income returns of a traditional bonds and can serve as another non-correlated income strategy in the Holy Grail portfolio. Private credit almost sounds like a way to protect yourself from the calamity that market crashes cause amongst traditional banks. The trade-off with private credit, though, is that while you receive your quarterly income payments, it can take 3 to 5 years to fully harvest your investment, because private credit lending lenders normally hold the loans that they make to maturity, but that's what provides the predictability that investors have grown to appreciate about it. Also, by the way, this whole 3 to 5 years things, that's spread throughout the book. I'm gonna touch a little bit more on that in my next video about this book, as well as a lot of this stuff, Sam, sounds incredibly complicated. Believe me, so much of what I just said, I got either straight from the book or I straight up looked it up. I can promise you, it is pretty complicated stuff. So I'll make sure to touch upon that and, the barrier to entry, you might call it, to private equity and all of this in my next video too. Chapter 5 is Energy, the Power of Our Lives, Part 1. You can't deny, though, that he does an excellent job conveying the importance of these things, and what I like is the way he explains how they contribute to things much larger than ourselves. Check out this quote here. Energy is the rope by which the poor can pull themselves up. It is also the rope we in the developed world must let down. It is the foundation for employment, education, food security, clean water, basic healthcare, internet access, entrepreneurship, global trade, and shared prosperity. Energy is the precursor for industry, and just as our bodies need oxygen, industry needs energy. This was a fascinating chapter, and my favorite part was when he talked about solar and wind and how they can't build industrial grade fields just anywhere. I also loved when he explained how bad it is for the government to create things that are good for the environment because it's such a big misconception about renewable energy. Chapter 6 is Energy, the Power of Our Lives, Part 2. The call to actions, promotions, advertising, and everything that utterly saturated life force, I didn't really see that in this one at all, which was extremely refreshing, might I add. Throughout the book, there is a significant but unexpected amount of product knowledge that does not directly have much to do with investing. This chapter was totally loaded with it. Everything from oil to graphite to EV production, it's extremely detailed. I think the connection comes from each chapter and sector of investing is the actual business it's in, but Robbins and I suppose Zook have a tendency to tie these products and investments together very, very well. Chapter 7 is Venture Capital and Disruptive Technology. This was a walk down tech disruption lane. It sounded like the riskiest alternative investment so far in the book. For those who don't know, venture capital is a capital invested in a project with a significant element of risk. A lot of the time people associate venture capital with Silicon Valley and all those, those like multi-billion-dollar tech startup companies and stuff. For example, this is what brought us some of the most commonly used apps and technologies like iPhones, Uber, Tesla, Spotify, PayPal, Airbnb, and much, much more. This chapter was a pretty big advertisement, but it wasn't like an annoying one. In fact, they even said verbatim, in fairness, we're not the only firm that takes this approach. So as an investor, I'd look at 2 important criteria before jumping in with a firm. It's not like they paint themselves as the only effective end-all be-all option. I just get a much cleaner vibe from this book than I did from Life Force with the self-promotion and the advertising. Chapter 8 is real estate, the world's biggest asset. This is the largest category with a global value of over $250 trillion. When's the last time you heard a dollar amount higher than that? I don't think I have. Everyone needs somewhere to live regardless of the economy, interest rates, etc. Despite being 7% of the total world population, North America includes 20% of global real estate value. Real estate has a special perk of, for lack of a better word, voiding the tax code or cheating the system, if you will. Investors can avoid paying taxes on any increase in value when their property is sold by exercising the option of buying more property and rolling over the gains as equity in the new investment. This is called a 1031 exchange. Done over and over again, this can create a perpetual deferral of taxation. Some investors can wipe out taxes on all accumulated gains with some clever and entirely legal estate planning, particularly in the US. The real estate market analysis for our day and age in this chapter, I also must say, is a super clean breath of fresh air. Chapter 9 is secondaries. Everyone loves a sale. I listened to this chapter 3 times. I just wasn't getting much out of it. Chapter 10, Robert F. Smith, the king of enterprise software. This is when they started to go into these interviews with this baker's dozen. This book was different from Life Force in that, one of many ways, regardless of who he's interviewing, the compressed interviews in this book read like actual interviews. It's fascinating to see how these people began in their backgrounds, also hearing them tell the stories from their own points of view. Chapter 11 is Ramzi Musalam, courting the biggest buyer on earth, the government. Also, just so you know, he was legit with it, at least 11 of these 13 people he interviewed, they are billionaires. And they're not just any billionaires. They're billionaires who became billionaires from investing. The reason I say it's 11 is because 2 of them I couldn't find, and pretty much every single one of them, if you look them up on Google, one of the very first suggestions is net worth.
But some of them care a little bit more about being rich than famous, if you know what I'm saying.
Chapter 12 is Vinod Khosla, the great disruptor. Every one of these people, they're crazy persistent. This guy fought tooth and nail to get into Stanford. There was one point where they put him on the wait list just to get him to stop bugging them about letting him in. And it didn't even work. But eventually they just decided to let him in when someone dropped out or something. But that's just nuts. Chapter 13 is Michael B. Kim, the godfather of Asian private equity. There's a lot here about Japan's economy and the investing opportunities out there, as well as how China is totally on the rise and has been for years. For some excellent info on this, definitely check out the China chapter in Ray Dalio's Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. Oh my gosh, that was such a good book. Chapter 14, Will Van Lowe, The Highly Charged Future of Energy. My cat just dropped a dookie in the litter box, and I swear it smells like black coffee. A few things I learned from this chapter is that the best investment opportunity in energy today is oil and gas, which is the last thing I expected, as the world still only gets 4% of its energy from wind and solar and 80% of it from fossil fuels. And that for wind and solar to become the primary source of energy, and for most vehicles on the road to be EVs in 30 years, is a wildly unrealistic expectation. Some of the book was a little tricky to understand, like I was saying, but some of it was just simple enough to understand. So it was kind of weird. Many of these guys went to Ivy League schools of business, so their viewpoints of these topics can be pretty intricate. It can be complex. Companies should spend 30 to 50% of their cash flow to reinvest in their businesses, and the other 50 to 70% to investors through buybacks and dividends. Companies should limit their production growth to low-digit percentages and deleverage their balance sheets. Chapter 15 is Ian Charles, swinging for the fence with pro sports ownership. I looked this guy up and just saw a bunch of stuff about the YouTuber James Charles and his brother Ian. I don't know. This was an interesting chapter though, because I love this guy's philosophy on management and leadership. It just sounds so authentic and organic. It was sort of giving that $1 trillion coach vibe, but this whole thing had much less to do with sports ownership than I thought it might. And chapter 16, David Sachs, the original PayPal mafia. This dude has his hands in everything: SpaceX, Reddit, Boring Company, ClickUp, Centrelink, OpenPhone, Neuralink, Replit, I think, and SourceGraph. Over half of them I've never even heard of before. It seems he's very aware of the relationship though between business and technology, which as an investor, I mean, how the hell can you ignore the importance of that? Here's a big quote, little warning, big quote, about American exceptionalism that I found very fascinating, some billionaire logic here. The world that's emerging right now is a multipolar world. That's different from the world around 1990 when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union broke up. America was the only superpower left. Now we're in a world roughly 30 years later when a number of countries are becoming powerful and innovating with technology. Back in the late 90s when I got to Silicon Valley, there was really only one Silicon Valley, one epicenter for technology in the world, and that was true for a long time. Now you see technology centers have sprouted up all over the world. Innovation is hard. Often you need geniuses to achieve breakthroughs, but once a breakthrough occurs, anyone can copy it. Catching up is easier than breaking new ground, and there are a lot of parts in the world that are catching up to the US. I think that's going to require us to think about the world in a different way. Chapter 7, Michael Reese, owning the future of private asset management. I mean, when you put a bunch of billionaires in a line and talk to each one of them for hours and compress the interviews into like, I don't know, 20, 30-minute segments, this book was a fantastic result of that, but it's clear that the intent of financial freedom and sharing, this whole thing of Ray Dalio's, where you invest in 8 to 12 different uncorrelated assets and there's a rough 80% decrease in downside, they are proudly displayed and shouted about from the rooftops. Chapter 18, Bill Ford, From Family Office to Global Powerhouse. I feel like the two best questions that Robbins and Zook asked people in these interviews are: one, who has been the most important person in shaping your success in life, and what did you learn or pull from them that shaped you? And two, if you had the whole world's attention for 5 minutes, what would you say? Chapter 19, Tony Florence, the original venture capitalist. Now that I think about it, a close third is what's happened in the last 18 to 24 months that you did expect and what's happened that you didn't expect. I was both surprised and not surprised to find out that many of these guys brought up the rise of China in the last 20 years and how just recently in those last like 18 to 24 months it has seriously taken off. Maybe like 25 to 30% of them brought that up. Chapter 20 is Bob Zook, Oil, Gas, and the Future of Renewables. Honestly, I was happy with this book. The topic is very unique. The way he approached it was very well rounded. The only thing I can think of that he didn't touch upon in terms of like big, really popular alternative investments, it was cryptocurrency, and I'm sure he had his reasons not to. The whole book is really well organized. The whole thing where he litters the book in advertisements and self-promotion. I have not seen a Robbins book with this little of it since maybe Awaken the Giant Within, which is crazy. It's been a while since I checked that one out, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm confident that you will not be mistaken in checking this one out either. Chapter 21, David Golub, Banking on the Future of Private Credit. This whole thing about how like Robbins is like, he's like a con man and a grifter and a snake oil salesman, so stupid. What the hell is snake oil? The only time I ever hear those two words together, it seems they revolve around some sort of salesman. I looked it up, by the way, and it makes sense what it is, but it sounds so outdated and like unnecessary. Chapter 22 is Barry Sternlicht, a global real estate empire. I can't speak much for Christopher Zook, but I don't think most people checking this out are checking out this book because he's in it. No offense to any diehard CZ fans. CZ did his thing. But I think the spotlight was on Tony Robbins as an author, speaker, and thought leader in this book. And what many people expect of Tony Robbins, a guy who to his followers has developed this legendary reputation for being just truly obsessed with greatness. What makes someone the greatest? What makes a product the greatest? What makes a company, an investment, a partnership the greatest? He's back. And in early 2024, this book is his primetime location. Quotes, yes, we plan on using as many sports analogies as possible in this chapter. Income is the outcome. A bank is a place where they lend you an umbrella in fair weather, then ask for it back when it begins to rain. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. Some of these folks call themselves skeptics, but in reality, they're just scared. Economics will trump politics. The market is an escalator on the way up and an elevator on the way down. Find the freight trains in your life and get on them, not in front of them. If a person won't give a dime out of $1, I can promise you they're not going to give $100,000 out of $1 million or $10 million out of $100 million. Direction 1. This is an extremely interesting book. So there are two groups of people I'd recommend it to. The first is anyone who's interested in how great private equity investors think about all sorts of things in the world of business and the business of the world. The second, this is a problem I also had with the book, and I'll bring it up in my video about problems I had with the book, but the short of it is that I'd also recommend it to accredited investors. For anyone who really wants a spoiler on that, just look up what an accredited investor is. It's pretty sad. Direction 2. If you like this book, I definitely recommend checking out Unshakable by Tony Robbins and also Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio for sure. The Holy Grail of Investing by Tony Robbins and Christopher Zook. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop any videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere and I will see you then.